All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at a pretty fascinating analysis today about the hidden costs that are literally draining retirement accounts across America. When we think about risks to our retirement, we usually panic about market crashes, right? Or inflation, or maybe unexpected health issues. But the source material we're digging into argues that the absolute biggest drain on your life savings might actually be totally invisible. It's this geographical wealth extraction, and it's happening quietly, day by day, based entirely on where you choose to live. Right off the bat, the analysis hits us with a super striking quote. The single most expensive mistake a retiree in America can make is the state you live in. And according to the data we're reviewing, we aren't talking about obvious scams or just making a bad investment. No, this is about how specific states methodically pull cash out of retirement accounts using these really complex layered taxation systems. Over a 20-year retirement, these state-level taxes can add up to the cost of an entire house or even years of long-term care. And the crazy part is, a lot of retirees don't even realize the sheer scale of what's happening until the money is just gone. To put that into a real-world perspective, the source gives us a comparison of two hypothetical retired teachers, Linda and Diane. Now, both of them have identical incomes. We're talking a $50,000 pension and $25,000 in Social Security, so $75,000 a year total. But here's the catch. Linda lives in Vermont, while Diane moved just across the border to New Hampshire. Because New Hampshire has zero state income tax on retirement distributions, Diane pays absolutely nothing to the state. Linda, on the other hand, is tangled up in Vermont's tax structure. Over a 20-year retirement, literally just by sleeping on the Vermont side of the border, Linda is going to pay an estimated $70,000 more in state taxes than Diane. I mean, 70 grand. That is a staggering difference for a middle-class retiree. So let's get into Section 1, Vermont's triple tax threat. Vermont is actually highlighted as one of the most aggressive states in our source material. They use this really complex web of wealth extraction. You see, it's not just about getting hit with one high tax rate. It's like a giant puzzle where different types of taxes just keep layering on top of each other. First up, the income tax. Vermont only offers a maximum pension exclusion of $10,000. And if your adjusted gross income creeps even a little too high, maybe from a required minimum distribution from an IRA, well, that tiny exclusion just phases right out. That ends up exposing even more of your Social Security to taxation. Then they go ahead and layer on the property tax. Vermont has an average effective property tax rate hovering around 1.42%. So on a modest $350,000 home, you're looking at paying nearly $5 grand a year. Between the income and the property taxes, a middle-class retiree there is sending thousands and thousands of dollars to the state every single year. But wait, the final and maybe the most brutal blow in Vermont's structure is their flat 16% estate tax cliff. Now, the federal government doesn't even touch estates under $15 million, right? But Vermont, they step in at just $5 million. And here's the real kicker the source points out. Vermont actually looks backward. If you made financial gifts to your family in the 2 years before you passed away, trying to sensibly reduce your estate, Vermont just goes and adds those right back into the total. If you cross that $5 million threshold, there is no smooth progressive phase-in. Nope, it's a flat 16% tax on everything above the limit. Moving on to Section 2, Minnesota's means-tested maze. Now, Minnesota creates its own totally unique set of challenges, heavily relying on some pretty insidious means testing, especially when it comes to Social Security. See, the state claims they offer a subtraction for Social Security benefits, but the reality is it phases out incredibly fast. For joint filers, once your provisional income bumps past roughly $15,000, you start losing that subtraction right away. Imagine you're a married couple pulling in a combined retirement income of $125,000 from pensions and IRAs. Well, you've completely blown past their threshold. Suddenly, thousands of dollars of your Social Security benefits are fully exposed to Minnesota's famously high state income tax rates. So the really crucial thing to understand here is what the source calls Minnesota's double extraction. Basically, they tax you heavily while you're alive, and then, they tax you again through the estate tax. Minnesota's estate tax exemption is shockingly low, just $3 million compared to the federal $15 million. And the rates? Absolutely brutal. They start with a 13% hit on the very first dollars over that $3 million limit. When you think about it, a modest home, maybe a bit of life insurance, and a healthy 401k can easily push a middle-class family right over that line. That ends up sending over 100 grand straight to the state before your heirs ever see a single dime. Okay, let's hit Section 3, California's costly illusion. The source material actually calls California the crown jewel of American retirement taxation. Now, they do exempt Social Security, which, let's be honest, is fantastic PR, but they aggressively target practically everything else to make up for it using these severe multipliers. The state hits retirees with 9 different income tax brackets that can soar all the way up to 13.3%. Pensions and IRA distributions, oh, those are taxed fully as regular wages. And then, well, you have to buy things, right? Between base sales taxes and local add-ons, you could be paying nearly 11% just to replace a broken washing machine or grab a bite at a restaurant. Plus, California taxes capital gains as ordinary income, so if you decide to downsize your home for retirement, you could instantly trigger a massive state tax bill. It's wild. And that brings us right to the grand illusion of California's property taxes. You've probably heard about Proposition 13, the law that caps property tax increases. And sure, that is absolutely fantastic if you bought your home back in, say, 1985. Your taxes might be sitting pretty at just $2,800 a year. But what if you're a new retiree who just relocated to California to be closer to the grandkids? Well, your tax is based on today's purchase price. Buying a modest home could easily trigger an annual property tax bill of anywhere from $5,600 to $8,400. So the longtime resident stays shielded while the new retiree gets absolutely crushed. The source also urges us to look beyond just the official tax code. We need to consider the hidden, mandatory costs of living, things like the climate. Up in Vermont, you're paying thousands a year just to keep from freezing in the winter. We're talking $2,500 to $4,000 annually, easy. But down in Florida, you're paying a fraction of that, maybe $800 to $1,200 just to keep from melting in the summer. When you stretch that out over a 20-year retirement, you're literally looking at tens of thousands of dollars in difference, purely to keep your house at a livable temperature. All right, Section 4, the safe harbor states. Now, knowing your exit strategy is absolutely crucial, and the data actually maps out a couple of fantastic alternatives that are built from the ground up to be super friendly to a retiree's wallet. First up, Pennsylvania. It's a highly overlooked safe harbor. They fully exempt all retirement income. Pensions, IRAs, 401ks, and Social Security are all entirely untouched by state income tax. How great is that? And then there's Tennessee. Tennessee has absolutely zero state income tax on anything, and their average property tax is incredibly low, right around 0.56%. These are the kinds of states that actually let retirees keep almost all of the money they worked so hard to generate during their careers. Which leads us to Section 5, the 20-year tax reality. And this comparison really drives home the core message of the source material. Just look at the estimated tax losses for a middle-class retiree over a 20-year span. It's shocking. In California, between your income, sales, and property taxes, a retiree is getting extracted for roughly $240,000, $240,000. Vermont and Minnesota, they're sitting around $160,000 to $180,000. Now contrast that with the tax-friendly states. Down in Florida, the burden, which is almost entirely just property taxes, drops to only $48,000 to $50,000. And in a state like Tennessee, it's practically minimal. We're talking about a staggering $190,000 difference between staying in California versus packing up and moving to Florida or Tennessee. Honestly, that's an entire inheritance. That's your long-term care funding. We are talking about literal generational wealth, and it's being determined entirely by an arbitrary state border. So, you gotta wonder, why is this happening in the first place? Well, the source makes a very specific claim about the real motivation behind these super aggressive tax structures. The analysis neutrally asserts that states like Vermont, Minnesota, and California aren't just heavily taxing retirees for the fun of it. They're doing it to backstop massive unfunded state pension liabilities. According to the material, these states made huge pension promises to state employees decades ago without actually setting aside enough money to pay for them. And now they're using the tax code to quietly drain the retirement accounts of everyday citizens just to make up that massive shortfall. And that brings us to the final, really provocative takeaway of this explainer. The source insists that, of course, quality of life and being near your family absolutely matter. Nobody's denying that. But you have to know the actual price tag attached to it. So you really have to ask yourself, are you just paying a premium for nice weather and a good lifestyle, or are you quietly subsidizing your state's unfunded promises with your hard-earned life savings? It's a pretty heavy question, right? The analysis strongly suggests that you sit down with your own specific numbers, maybe consult a professional, and make a fully informed choice about exactly where you want to spend your next 20 years.